Okay, on the show today, Alexandra Roxo. So she's author, guide. I think I came across her on Instagram just saying really cool and interesting stuff about women's sexuality, various other issues. So, Alexandra, welcome.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here today.
So, how did you get here?
Okay.
Like, what's your
Well, I
story
walked
with
down the
the life?
stairs
I went to the
and I
toilet,
opened the
looking
door.
back. No, how did you get interested in what you do now?
So for most of my adult life, well, I entered onto my spiritual path quite young. I mean, I guess you could say we've all been entered onto our spiritual path quite young, but some of us become aware of the path at different ages. So around the age of 12, my mom took me to my first spiritual teacher who taught me about karma and my aura and my chakras, who really explained to me a vision of what it means to be alive. He was like, "You're here, and I'm going to explain to you what you're doing here." And he
Wow.
gave me an image. His name's Bobby Drinnen. He's passed on now, but he wrote some books, but he was very he said no to most international press, most press. He really didn't want to become a star, even though a lot of really famous people went to him. He was really particular about not wanting to like go do the fame route, which I'll never know exactly why, but he just chose that. But he explained to me, he was like, "Okay, I want you to imagine that you're on a stage and that you have all these rocks hanging from strings off your body. And in this life, you are going to work hard to take off these rocks one by one so that you can move freely across the stage." And that metaphor, saying that to a 12, 13-year-old, it worked. I understood what he was saying. I understood, okay, I'm here on this planet not to just, eat, drink, watch TV, but I'm here to learn something. I'm here to grow. And he also contextualized life and said, there are these different classrooms you'll go through, and sometimes you'll have to repeat them. So that worked for me. So I feel like I kind of got catapulted onto my spiritual path consciously at a young age, which was a real big gift from my mother. Once I went into college, I went to NYU, and that's really where I began my journey with not only storytelling, but embodiment.
In New
Uh,
York, right? Just for the
yeah, New York University. I was at Tisch School of the Arts, and this was nearly 20 years ago. Actually, 20 years ago. Yeah, because I'm 38. I went when I was 18, in September of 2002. So the amazing thing about that program that I went to is that it was really about liberating the body, liberating the voice, liberating the emotions so that you become the most open channel that you can be. In that context, it was to be the best artist, actor, etc. But they really shared with us, this is for life. This is for
yeah,
you to
yeah.
be able to
There's
walk through
that
life.
perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, we all showed up with our like crunchy posture and our funny little voices and like
Yeah.
help unkink us and like stretch us open. And I will like never forget all my teachers from that time. During that time, I also really became interested about women's stories, why there was a split between spirituality and sensuality and sexuality in like in the religions, how that came to be, that as women we were not allowed to be these sensual, full, juicy beings, and also deeply mystical and spiritual, and specifically the West, because that's where I grew up. So I started telling stories and writing about that. I was really angry at first. I was definitely an angry young feminist, like, hey, this is wrong. I'm allowed to be spiritual and also a woman who is embodied in my senses, has a healthy sexuality. Like, where did this split happen? And so I wrote a lot about that. I made films, and I look at my own journey as, instead of having a vocation, as having like a curiosity, like a thesis in life, an exploration. And for me, it's really been this. It's been, as a woman, how do we inhabit our bodies and have this rich spiritual and also sensual life? And how do we mend that split? And so, yeah, that's been a through line through all of my work. From my book that I wrote, Fuck Like a Goddess, Heal Yourself, Reclaim Your Voice, Stand in Your Power, which came out with Sounds True in 2020.
It's a good title. It's a good title,
Thank you.
Alexandra. You got it. It jumps off the page, doesn't it?
It did. When I pitched the title to the point that it came out, I had a real oh shit moment where I was like, oh shit, why did I do that?
My mum gonna see this. Is this gonna give me a reputation I don't want? Like, what was the oh shit? Like, I'm curious.
I just felt like, am I gonna live up to the title? Is the book gonna live up to the title?
Yeah.
I also didn't want people to be confused that it was like a sex manual, because it's really like a book around healing and empowerment. And it's like more metaphorical, which I explain in the first chapter. I'm like, Fucking Like a Goddess is not just about the physical, superficial. It's
also
about
Fuck Like a Porn Star, apparently, out.
What?
Women. There's another book out called Fuck Like a Porn Star.
Right. Mine's a spiritual version.
Pretty much has the spectrum of people want to sort of see sexuality in one of those two boxes normally, don't they?
Right. And mine really was from a spiritual perspective and from like a healing and a holistic perspective, and also just like a living your life as a full woman. So yeah, I'm sure a few people picked it up and were like, oh, this isn't telling me like a 101 kind of sex manual. But if they read the subheader, it says, heal yourself, reclaim your voice, stand in your power. So I think there's a lot
heal yourself. So there's a kind of like therapeutic kind of trauma piece.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's definitely, there are practices and exercises that support you to do your own solo self-healing work.
So the book is for women?
Yeah, but I think that I've gotten message from non-binary folks, trans folks who've loved the book, gay men who have loved the book. I don't think I've gotten a lot of messages from, cis hetero men that love the book, but probably a few, actually.
I wouldn't buy a book called How to Fuck Like a Goddess.
Yeah.
Personally, but maybe there's the other one.
But I'm sure you would learn something about the female psyche and process, if you read the book.
I've got a lot to learn. What might the average guy learn about women through reading this book? Let's educate some people out there.
I think especially that we don't always wear our scars and wounds on the surface. And so I think it's important to consider that everyone, and this is for men, women, anybody, every non-binary, trans, doesn't matter, that everyone you meet is a human who's been through a lot. Yeah. And that a lot, we don't know, we won't ever be able to feel or know exactly what that is, but remembering that everyone we meet, if we can just stop and take a breath and know that they've been hurt deeply, that they may have gone through some nightmares this life, that they may be doing the best they can in this moment. And I think that reading the book, I would hope if a man read it, he'd be like, wow, like bravo, women, for like continuing your healing process. Who am I to assume anything about you until I really deeply know you? And I just think that's across the board humanity, for us to hold each other in that regard when we meet, instead of immediately going into judgments or assumptions, which is sometimes how the mind, I think, functions. But to take a breath and to redirect the mind into the place of, wow, I don't know anything about this person, but I can know that they're going through something right now, that they likely have been deeply hurt, that they are probably trying the best that they can in this moment, and allowing that to bring forward compassion, if possible.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I kind of had most of my trauma education in my 30s, and I kind of look back now and go, God, would I do dating differently in the past if I'd have known what I know now? And the answer is hell yeah.
Yeah.
The answer is hell yeah. Even if it's just being a bit more considerate for what looks like crazy behavior or whatever. Like
exactly.
Kind of going, that might not be obvious. Oh, okay.
Right.
There's more there.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, if your topic is modern femininity, it's one of the top topics when we sort of put through a thing beforehand and saying, hey, any topics you want to work with? Like, what's your take on modern femininity? I guess there's loads of ways in on that. How is it misunderstood? Might be one. Is there something you're particularly passionate about talking about? Like, any way in you like.
Yeah. So I think that modern femininity right now is in a still transformational process. Like for me, let's say the behaviors, the roles and identities that I witnessed my mother and grandmother in, I have shifted, alchemized, expanded upon, discarded the ones that don't work, sometimes quite violently or aggressively, and sometimes it's taken years and years and years of work. So when we consider modern femininity, I think that each woman's journey is going to be so different depending on her culture, her ethnicity, her religion, the type of community she grew up
Sure.
in. So I think that within modern femininity, there's space for everyone's journey to be uniquely their own. I do think the thing in common is that women are questioning, right? So that there may have been times where we just like accepted the roles and identities and behaviors. Let's say one of them being like that women gossip or that women sort of complain about their men, right? Like, I don't know if you ever had that, but I definitely saw women in my family, especially in Brazil, they would sit at their own table at a family gathering.
Is that where you grew up or in the States?
I grew up between the US and Brazil. My father's Brazilian, my mom's American. So with my mom, I grew up in the Christian Bible Belt South in Georgia. And with my dad, I would go and be in Brazil. So it's a very
different attitude to the body. I've lived a bit in Brazil and spent time in the US. So
exactly, which I talk about in my book, which is part of the gift that I've been given this life, is to have been able to hold both and to go back and forth as a little girl between like string bikinis and samba to, you know, like Presbyterian church telling me I was a sinner. It was like a very interesting way for my sensuality and relationship to my body to form. But yeah, so like I was saying, like in Brazil, when I was a kid, I remember some of the women sitting at a table and they would just, you know, complain about the guys, their men, their husbands. And that was an acceptable female behavior, right? So I think that there are things like that, that many of us in different cultures in different ways, I think are questioning. We're like, I don't know if I want to do all the things that I saw modeled to me, right? And some of those things that were modeled to us were trauma responses as well, right? Fawning, for instance, like there's a lot of fawning, especially I think in like Western, maybe more white Protestant. That's like where I grew up, so I know that, which is kind of like that archetype of woman who's like, oh yeah, oh you look amazing, oh my God, you know, like that behavior, that archetype that was really acceptable for women to sort of be in that pretending everything's okay and like you look amazing, right?
I was having lunch there, a waitress, I asked for the music to be turned down in a restaurant, which I do fairly often, and the waitress immediately put on an utterly fake smile. It's very American, actually. You don't see it much in Europe. And she said, of course. And then before she turned around, she dropped it. And it was like, and then she went back to doing her work. And I just thought, wow, I was sort of impressed. I was like, what a skill to just turn on a smile like that. And I don't know many guys who have that skill.
Exactly. And that was one that I think a lot of us inherited and that we had to decondition from. And I still find myself doing it. Like I'll find my voice getting higher into this kind of signaling of everything is okay. Like, oh, okay, no problem. Right. Which is, some of that is actually really animal. It's like saying, I'm not going to attack you. A friend of mine a friend of mine is a student of Peter Levine's work. And she's like, oh, we study this with animals. And there's a reason sometimes that the voice gets higher in order to say, I'm not going to hurt you.
Safety signaling, right? But
yeah, right.
Please don't hurt me. I won't hurt you. It's saying both of those things, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I do think that some of these outdated modes of behavior are really being questioned, discarded, released, transformed within modern femininity. And I think that there's an expansiveness where we're like, oh, femininity isn't what was sold to us. And so really, what is it? And it is so unique to each person. There's really
if you say it's totally, I'm going to interrupt a little bit. If you say it's totally unique to each person, is it a concept at all? I mean, if we're reconstructing it from the past, like nobody even knows what a woman is anymore. So
Right.
like no one was willing to answer that question. So
Right.
can we say femininity is a thing at all? Or if we just say it's totally unique to everyone, that's like saying it's nothing.
Well, I think we can in specific contexts. In the
Yeah.
spiritual context, if we look at some of the most ancient spiritual traditions and wisdom streams, there is an archetypal version of femininity that is quite clear
Mhm.
within some, there's similarity, right, within certain traditions and streams of wisdom. So you could see that in, let's say, like tantric Buddhism, or like different forms of Hindu Tantra, like Kashmiri Shaivism. You can see this polarity, right? You can see it in the Taoist tradition with yin and yang, Shiva Shakti. So there are these archetypal concepts. Carl Jung has his version of it that is from a more Western canon about anima and animus. So the across time, the archetypal energies of masculine, feminine, sun, moon, yin, yang, Shiva, Shakti exist. So I do think archetypally we are informed by these greater energies.
Do you get pushback against that? I mean, because what I've seen is that you'll get a sort of modern feminist kind of take, which is, femininity is just constructed, it's mostly unhealthy, it's mostly something to be rejected. There's another trend in feminism of like, no, actually female traits are actually very powerful, we shouldn't reject them. And then there's a sort of spiritual take, which is, hey, this goes across cultures, there are these ancient ideas like yin and yang, Shiva Shakti. And sometimes there's with those three positions, there's quite a lot of conflict, I've noticed.
Totally.
And the sort of
Yeah.
modern femininity scene seems to be sort of mixing them in different ways, and they're not the same. To say there's no such thing as femininity, is all constructed and it's ancient and archetypal, and can we tune into it?
Yeah, I fall more in that camp just because I've been a student of all of these different spiritual traditions at different times. So I do fall into that camp. I do acknowledge that some of the behaviors are conditioned, right? But I don't think that is like the true feminine essence. Like fawning. I don't think that's a true feminine essence. I think that's our reactive behavioral conditioning. So I think we've had to sort of wring some of that out in a way, because to get to the essence of something, when for so long there's been all this crap piled on top of it, it's like I wasn't raised in a tradition, in a home that honored these kind of archetypal energies. Like I didn't have relationship with different goddesses as a young woman, not until I was 18. So I don't know what it's like to grow up with that internal mythology and acceptance of those archetypal energies. I grew up with God as this patriarchal, like God the Father, I'm a sinner, I'm a bad girl, and I had to wring all of that out over so much time, and the behaviors that came as a response to that. So the journey to even getting to like what is feminine essence, that is unique for each person, each woman specifically. I do think that there are universal feminine essences, and I love to experience them through deities, goddesses, and different traditions. To me, that feels true. I've had the privilege to be able to travel to different sacred sites where I really feel that feminine presence and essence in my body as truth. And that's really important on my journey.
Makes sense. Often we just did this big event with obviously women leading it, not me, with the company on female trauma, and there were certain themes that emerged. So they weren't universal to all women, but things like putting others' needs first, and fawning responses, slightly different trauma responses, and being out of touch with pleasure, that being made bad, and not in every culture, so it's almost half Brazilian, but certainly in a bunch, right? Like the kind of female body. And more broadly, embodiment itself has been characterized as a feminine thing, right? So guys have this problem coming to embodiment of, hey, the body's kind of girly stuff. As a guy, you're supposed to just push through and ignore your body, but the body's feminine in many traditions. So, any more thoughts bouncing off that?
Yeah, I mean, I think of the Latin word of like mater and mater and mother, and from the depth psychology kind of canon of Marianne Woodman and Carl Jung, that that matter is mother, is body, is feminine, and that the psyche and the soma are interchangeable there. I don't think that that means that, you know, a man having a relationship with his body is feminine. But if you look into the archetypal, and I'm not quite an expert in this arena, I'm more expert in like interpersonal than sort of the philosophical, let's say, but I'm a student in that regard. But if you can think about that, Shiva Shakti of like the stillness, the emptiness, right? The consciousness and the physical incarnation, manifestation being that feminine, that would be within one's own internal mythology and internal architecture. And so you can choose to categorize it that way or not, right? And so maybe if you like to conceptualize your beingness and yourself through that lens of, you know, consciousness and, let's say, light, radiance, form, or stillness and energy, or spirit and matter, that again is playing into those archetypal dualities, right? So the spirit would be more of that masculine archetypal, and the matter would be more of the feminine. But putting that into the practical, I think, you know, a man having a relationship with his body doesn't have to be necessarily a relationship with his feminine. I think it can be, the body does hold like sensations, senses, emotions. If he relates to that as the energy that is ever changing, which relates to his feminine, then awesome. But I mean, that's very abstract, right? Like I'm talking in like the lofty concept side of things right now. I don't think it has to be lofty. I think it can just be like, oh, wow, I'm getting in touch with my body and what it feels like to be in here, and what my experience is of it, and where I've neglected it, where I've been ashamed of it, etc. Does that process need to be masculine or feminine? I don't think so.
Yeah, most hippie guys end up looking a bit girly, though, don't they? Let's be honest. The average long-haired guy in Boulder is pretty. It's not someone I'd introduce to any women I know. But
well, this is an interesting concept, and I'm a longtime student of like the David Data lineage and some of his teachers, and you know, I've read his books for 20 years. I really love his work, and you know, I think in some of his work, and I'm not quoting him verbatim, but he talks about like the yoga flow boy, you know, and like the man who has now over-identified with emotions, over-identified with like the sort of therapeutic or, you know, listening and So I think that in every man's evolution, there may be phases that, and same with women, where a woman needs to kind of reclaim her power. Now she could get lost in over-identifying with her powerful self, right?
Yeah, the obnoxious stage. Society. The obnoxious stage. I mean, society is going through it as a whole, right? Like this, the sort of. I mean,
we're having some teenage kind of embarrassing moments, I think.
Yeah, just to map out for listeners then. So Data's model was femininity goes through 3 stages. So there's the sort of traditional trad housewife who doesn't question feminine norms and roles. And then there's a reactivity to that, which is, you know, the teenage stage, as you say, the sort of pushback, the I'm not going to do anything feminine, fuck all that. And then the other side of that, which is sadly very rare, which is the radiant feminine is re-owned, but as a choice, not as a have to. Is that a fair 1 minute summary of a life story?
Yeah, that feels like a quickie version of the first, second, and third stage, which he talks about in depth in his book, Intimate Communion. So if anyone's interested, I mean, I haven't read that book in 10 years, but I'm pretty sure that's the one. Yeah.
So women are miserable now. Like there are, like statistically, it's true. Like highest levels, women are miserable. The highest levels of drug addiction, suicide, and mental ill health of women ever recorded. That's just
oh my God. So you should help do my marketing then. Because you know the stats. I don't know those stats.
They're huge. I mean, for men too, but they're absolutely huge. Why are women so mentally unwell, so suicidal? Like, surely they've had this women's liberation. They've had some, you know, rights for women, and not like they are in Iran or Saudi Arabia, where I have students I was just talking to. And yet women are absolutely miserable. Why?
Well, I want to just speak to humanity as a whole. I think we are in a pickle right now. I think that there's more isolation than we've ever experienced. And I don't know if that's specific to post-COVID, or I don't know the statistics pre and post in terms of depression and mental health and suicide and drug addiction. But I do feel our ability to be connected to each other outside of isolation, to feel supported, to feel like we're a village, to feel like we're not alone, that has dwindled greatly. That is, I mean, I think people reach for their phone and their computer way more than they reach for actual human connection nowadays. And I don't know all the studies around how much we need connection and affection, but I do know that it's an inherent part of our human nature, and that in the places like, let's say, the blue zones in the National Geographic, that they, where they have the centenarians. Did I say that right? Centenarian, the people that live to be 100. Yeah. So that one of the most important pieces is community. And I think that there, especially in the West, there is such isolation. I really do think that, like, the American dream, or the dream of like just building and success and climbing, means isolating the community, the family. It means that the family loses the father and the mother sometimes. So now you have children without any parents at home.
I'm with you. So there's the wider societal issues, technology, isolation, all that stuff. I'm with you 100%.
That's what I think about. I can't say personally why, let's say, more women maybe are hurting. Like, I don't know. I'm not an expert in that way, but I do feel humanity on a whole, we're super disconnected. We also don't have most people, right? If you were to do a census, I think, of the billions. Well, actually, I don't know the answer to that, but I do know a lot of people in America don't have a spiritual through line to their life. So there's a lack of meaning. And there's a million podcasts about the meaning crisis and our crisis for meaning, et cetera. And I do think that plays a huge factor in our day-to-day. If there's no meaning to what we're doing, then it's an existential, like, shit show.
Yeah, for sure. We had John Vervaeke on, others talking about that here.
Oh yeah, he's great, right? Yeah,
he's great, very smart. Does it feel like men and women are at war in America? Because in England and many countries I've been to, it sort of feels like that. Like, I spoke to a Ethiopian lady just a couple of days ago. She just came over to study gender studies at university here in Sussex, which is quite radical left-wing university. And she was really confused. She was saying, why all the women on the course seem to dislike men. There's only one guy on the course. I thought this was going to be about gender, not just about women. I come from a place that has many issues. You know, Ethiopia, for example, has higher levels of female genital mutilation, like really serious issues. And, you know, I really care about those issues. But she said, I like men. And she said, it doesn't seem like the young people at university like each other, like men and women she was referring to. And that's, so it seems to be a more common thing, that there's this kind of war between men and women, and totally the guys are all listening to Jordan Peterson and the girls are all listening to radical feminism, and they sort of there seems to be this awful war between men and women. Is that something you've seen, or is it just my experience here maybe?
No, I feel it too. It makes my heart sad, you know, especially I work with clients one-on-one as part of my kind of work, my canon of work, the different things that I do. And when I see a woman whose heart is closed and hardened by all of her anger towards men, or blame or shaming of men on a whole, it just hurts my heart, because I know that, like, she's blocking love from reaching her. I know that it's actually not going to do much good in the long run to just hold all of that anger and blame within one's physical body. Talk about embodiment. The burden of carrying for years anger, rage, blame towards men, that takes a toll on a woman. You know, you can see it in her face, you can feel it in her. So that, to me, it feels really sad when I work with women. And I know it's like, you're going to have to lay this burden down. You're going to have to disidentify eventually with your victim consciousness. My book is partially about disidentifying and moving through the victim consciousness. So really taking a moment to go, yes, I'm mad at the patriarch. I'm mad because I was raped. I'm mad at my dad, whatever. and then to keep on moving, to keep loving, to keep opening, and not to create a life where you are so identified with your victim consciousness that you don't get to experience love, or, you know, having healthy men in your life if you're a woman, having good friendships with men, love, whatever, sex. So I do feel that. I feel that a lot, and it pains my heart. I mean, the teachers that have spoken about this publicly, about this in a radical way, they're not getting a lot of good vibes back, right?
Well, right now it's a tricky environment for it.
For pointing at women and saying, hey, it's time to like stop with this blaming and shaming game. It's not getting you anywhere. I do think it's a part of like our own healing process and evolution. Again, I talk about in my book, but like, you can't get stuck there, living a life from a victim consciousness of being just angry and upset. It's going to feel terrible in your body. It doesn't feel like love, for sure.
Yeah, and it's also a big ask, you know, if I'm coaching a woman who's had a lot of violence personally, which is a lot of women, let's be honest. Like, I still feel like I need to say that for all the guys out there who don't yet get that. Like, there's been a lot of shit. And then generationally, you know, maybe it was a mother, grandmother, you know, my wife's from Ukraine, right? Imagine past history, you know?
Yeah.
So even if she had a great life. And there's a big ask to say, hey, you might need to forgive here. You might need to move on from this, you know, like, it doesn't seem like society is really supporting that right now. I don't know where are we at with sort of Me Too, post Johnny Depp, Me Too, like, where are we at now?
Yeah, well, it takes a lot of deep work. I mean, I think about how much time and energy I put into my own healing. It's a huge privilege to be able to sit in therapy, to sit in ceremony, to sit in workshops where you process through your anger, pain, grief. A lot of women are just busy trying to keep food on the table for their kids.
For that shit. It's not Boulder everywhere.
Exactly. So that's where I think we have to have compassion for the place that we're in. It's going to take as long as it takes. For the women who, let's say, make it to my podcast or make it to one of my, you know, retreats or read my book, like, they may be able to feel a small invitation of, okay, don't skip over your pain. Don't skip over the trauma. That's not going to work. But know that there is the other side. Like, there is a day when you're less angry. I used to hate my father. The things that happened between us I thought were unforgivable. And I did enough work over, I don't know, 20 years that I love him so much now. And I have a great relationship with him. And I look at it as like the greatest transformation that I've ever done in my life. But it took 20 years. When I was 18, I was like, I'm going to learn to forgive my father. I thought I would do a few affirmations and that'd be the end of it. I mean, I sat in ayahuasca ceremonies, puking my brains up for years, in therapy for years and years and years. Yeah. And I still hated him. And so I had to like really work on it. A lot.
Are there any ex-boyfriends?
And so I don't think that it's a light thing that we just have to go, hey, ladies, get over your pain. That's not fair.
It's a big thing. It's a big thing. And while we work,
and this is where patience and compassion, practicing patience and compassion, and is so important, right? Because to sit with someone, right? And people, I'm sure, felt this with me at times. They're like, oh, is she ever going to get over this? Right? That took compassion and patience for them to be with me in my pain instead of, you know, tell me like, get over it, girl. Right? So it's not fair for us to ask people to get over it. I don't think it is, you know, but we can also continue to create in a way that invites people into what's after that level of healing, what's after that feeling of the pain, that we don't have to stay there, because that's also a part of the path that people need to feel that it's possible, like that it's actually possible to not have to carry that much pain and grief about what we've experienced, because it is possible.
It's definitely good women who are there. It's not in the zeitgeist very much. It's not in the media very much, but I know a lot of good women who are there. And I was sitting having lunch with a friend of mine the other day. She's just like, I love men. And like hearing that is very pleasant.
Yeah. We have to bear the discomfort of being patient, you know, and continuing to do our work in the world and invite people into love instead of staying in a closed off space of anger. Right. And also feeling that just because, like, you can be still really fucking mad about what happened to you, and you can open your heart Like it's not one or the other. And this is a more complex spiritual truth or sort of concept to hold in your body, but that you can feel heartbroken by what has happened to you. And through that heartbreak, still open your heart. And that's very different. So you can still open to the moment, open to say, let's say a new person in your life, and you haven't necessarily quote unquote healed all the past. That's a higher practice for people.
What are your sort of women listening to this? They're thinking, okay, being more heart-led, reconnecting to sensuality, seeing that as a spiritual practice and not, against spirituality. Sounds like it's core in your work. What would be your sort of beginning points for them then? So those of us, maybe can't afford loads and loads of therapy or ayahuasca retreats in the jungle or whatever. Like,
no, you don't have to do what I did. Don't do what I did.
That's a lot, right? I mean, you're a professional.
I'm not normal. I'm not normal.
So what would you suggest? Like, let's give a few practical things for the women out there listening.
Yeah. So some of the things that I just feel like are universal when we're coming into, let's say, a greater, more intimate relationship with ourselves, with our own femininity, with our body, healing around your relationship to your menstrual cycle. If you still bleed, if you don't bleed, if you've had your uterus removed or you've gone through menopause, you can still create some sort of a ritualistic time. So one of the things that really disconnects us from our internal cycles and our emotions and the body sensations is the years of training that a lot of us have had in pretending like we're not bleeding, pretending like we're like pints of blood are not dripping out of us and just going about life like nothing's happening.
Listen, I've got a solution. Tampons should have bells on. Like on the bit of street, there should be like bells. And then everyone knows, just one of those things. We'll just get used to, there's a woman ringing the bell.
Oh my God, that sounds like a nightmare.
Act
I appreciate the humor.
I mean, I'm joking. That's actually, I stole that joke from an old comedian.
There's a healing of the relationship with our own cyclical nature, right? Not trying to make ourselves go at 100 miles an hour all the time, honoring our cycles of rest, honoring our own cycles of cleansing and transformation that happen for those of us who bleed, creating space around that and creating a lifestyle where you are honoring your endings and beginnings. So this is really important. And I think a lot of women come into context in relationship with this via the moon. And being able to see this external representation of, the moon goes really dark every month and quiet. And then it gets big and like full moons are when everybody has partied, historically for a million years. And so I am a reflection of that. I am this lunar, I am this being that has a cycle. To me, a lot of women may be like, I've already done that. Great job. I think that's a huge part.
It's big though, right? I've seen a lot of female students really get into that, colleagues, and it connects them to this idea of rest and activity, almost to the point of view that I've gone, God, what do I tell male students? That's been so helpful for that basic biological rhythm, like just connecting to that. Like women are in a way forced to, or not forced, but there's an opportunity there, isn't it? That I know
there's an opportunity, but we're trained from young not to take that opportunity, most of us, unless we have grown up maybe in a more indigenous culture. But most of us, I think, especially in the West, are trained to take some Advil and like shove a tampon in and pretend like just keep going and keep going. So I always think that that's a beautiful way of reconnecting with the body, to reconnecting with our own innate spirituality. I get into so much of this in my book, but I'm just going to give a few kind of top level pieces here. Nature in general, I would say, again, is like kind of an extension of our own body, and cyclical nature is us trusting nature and trusting our own body. So getting out in nature, getting in contact with water and earth, again, not something that maybe you grew up doing. Maybe actually, I know some women that grew up kind of like, beautiful forest fairies. But
I grew up on farms, so
yeah, if you spend a lot of time in front of a computer or a TV, or devices in general, then getting in touch with your body and feeling how it exists in the natural environment inherently calls forth your instinctual nature, will get you more in touch with what it really feels like to be in that body. I use a lot of breath with women to get in contact with. I do a lot of deep pelvic breathing. It's more of a down regulating breath. It's not a breath that, let's say, is for bringing up like all of the trauma. It's more of a breath to anchor our consciousness and awareness down into our lower part of our body. A lot of us modern humans, our awareness is kind of like in the upper half, right? Kind of, we're more head centric in a way. So a lot of women, I find it's the idea of inhabiting the pelvis, of inhabiting the lower part of the body is a bit foreign. So I use a lot of breath, and I would recommend to women, how can you breathe into your lower body? And softening the belly. Softening the belly is huge. Again, some of this may sound super basic 101, but I see women years and years and years, and they're still sucking in their belly, which creates a tightness in the lower half. And a tightness is like bracing. With bracing, we don't feel, we're bracing. So you're preventing feeling in this lower half of your body. You're cutting off pleasure. You're cutting off energy there. That's also, if you're looking from a chakra-based system, where the second chakra is like creativity, sexuality, energy. So if you're just holding that tight all the time, your stomach, your belly, your lower abdomen, then you're preventing yourself from really knowing your true creative sexual nature. So a lot of breath softening, so much softening. And I don't mean it in a soft like a sweet bunny. It's like soft in terms of getting rid of all that bracing in the nervous system, getting rid of all of that sort of clenching, pulling in. It's really that clenching and tightness is the opposite of feeling and sensuality. Creating space for that in the body is so important. I see women who come in and they're like super controlled, type A, tight. Maybe they've gone to so many Pilates classes that everything is so tight. And I'm like, you need to just become mushy like a ripe peach, my love. Like, you got to breathe. You got to let there be some space in that being right now. Everything is just sucked in.
Pilates is notorious for it, but some yoga.
But I love Pilates. I go to Pilates, so I can like really joke about it. But I know that there's a line where, especially Western women, we become very tight and controlled, which is the opposite of sensuality and love and inhabiting the body fully. And I really saw this difference when I was in Brazil as a child, because all of the women that I saw around me, they had their own shadows for sure, but inhabiting the body as if the body is like this moving water, just sensual flow. I used to be just like mesmerized. Granted, a lot of them got plastic surgery at different points and all the things.
There's other dark sides, right? But I spent 6 months living in Brazil, and it was a real wake-up call to me. Like that, you could, like, men as well are much more sensual there. And it's just a friend of mine's house that his Brazilian wife was there. She said, "Oh, Mark, it's so nice to see you." And she kissed him on the cheek and said hello to me. And I was like, okay, even from a Brazilian who's been living in England 10 years, that feels real different than anything I've experienced today. So I kind of feel like all us Northern Europeans, I always joke my Swiss and German students, particularly if you want to see a lack of femininity. So Northern Europe is the place to go. And
which I love, like
Switzerland, Holland.
The movie The Northman. I don't know if you saw it.
Yeah.
Did you see it with Alexander Skarsgård? So for me, as a feminine being, I'm like, ooh, like, give me that tall Swede.
They're cool, but they've lost the edge. The guys have lost the edge.
And I mean, I'm not glorifying Viking behavior. I'm talking about it in a little bit more of a cheeky way, but archetypally, let's say, that kind of like, I'm like this warrior vibe. I think it speaks to different places in the feminine psyche. Not for all of us. I'm not saying that you guys all, are Alexander Skarsgård fans.
Well, as a guy who's often quite yang, that's a mixed blessing. Let me tell you, if you've got a little bit of that energy, it's a very mixed blessing in the modern world. And
my partner is like that too. He can come across as like very kind of stoic, and sometimes I'm like, babe, smile. but like, he's not going to be
Smiling's for girls. We don't smile. So,
like,
okay, so advice for the guys then. So there's a few kind of tips, areas to explore for women. Advice for the guys, like if you want to, how do you bring out the goddess fucking?
Well, I think having this compassion towards whatever phase she's in, and that she might have some residual sort of anger or tension or historical residue, let's say, towards men.
Yeah.
And that's just where we're at. So try not to take it personally. If possible, try to breathe that down and try to be patient for the heart that's underneath that. Because the heart that's underneath that will come through eventually if there's connection there. So I would say patience. I think that often people think that if a man is more, let's say, young, like the word you used, that maybe he wouldn't get his feelings hurt by a woman saying something about being angry at men or blaming men. I find that to be actually untrue. I think that even a very, let's say, masculine man, emotionally, physically, intellectually, can feel the impact of, let's say, a woman being really angry or upset at men on a whole. I think we have to remember that. So I think there's a conversation there that is allowed for men. So I would say, men, don't be afraid to say, like, hey, my love, or hey, woman I'm dating, when you shit talk men like that, it actually hurts.
Yeah, it's sadly become very normal to say, men are trash, and these things that are really quite outrageous statements about nearly 50% of the population.
Yeah, so that's not good. So please speak up about it with love, besides being defensive and reactive about it, right? See if you can find your best practice in that moment to share the impact from a place of love, but a place of fierceness if need be too. I'm not saying aggressive or violent, obviously, but saying like, hey, I don't like that. Right.
Yeah, I just say it's not okay if I have podcast guests on, for example, that make.
Yeah. And that really, it's supportive to us, and a woman may go, oh my God, and make it defensive. And then, it's okay. Like, work it out, breathe into it. So what else for men?
We need a sort of wrap up point. Yeah. One more.
Let me think. Another thing for men these days, advice for men. Just because the flow of culture is telling you not to, let's say, inhabit some of your masculine traits, don't cower to that. We need you. Like, we really need you. And you get to discern what is healthy in that regard. I can't tell you. So you get to discern what is that healthy masculine behavior trait, and bring it. The world needs it. We need healthy men around us. We need healthy patriarchs. We need heads of homes that are, not just kind of crumpled over with bad posture, playing video games and watching TV. Like, we need fierceness. We need these different archetypes of men in the home or in love, right? And there are so many great men out there doing incredible men's work. So if you don't have a circle, like a tribe, village, whatever word you'd like to use for yourself, if you don't have that, then you need to find that, because you need to have other models of good behavior and men that have been doing the work for a long time to stay close to that. Otherwise, you're going to model it off what you see in TV or the collapsed version, which is more prevalent at this time. So please do yourself and all of us a favor by staying close to those amazing models and examples. Find your men's group, create your men's group, do practice that has you strong, tall in your body, meditate, focus your presence. Don't be looking at your phone all the time. Find your awareness that is calm, clear, and present, fierce when it needs to be. There's some great people out there in the world right now that are offering opportunities for men to not just operate from the old kind of paradigm, so to speak, but what is necessary now without abandoning their strength and masculinity.
Cool. We want to point some people to your stuff. So it's Alexandra and then roxo.com. So Alexandra, Roxo.com. The book's pretty easy to find on Amazon and Barnes Noble and Sounds True and all the rest of it, right? You just go to Amazon and put in Fuck Like a Goddess and it'll come up pretty soon. Got loads. It's clearly popular because it's had loads of reviews. So it's clearly.
Thank you.
Well.
Thank you. And you can also check out my podcast called Holy Fuck. I'm also on Instagram. You can see me on some TV shows. All that's on my website. And I do retreats. I do one-on-one work. And I have a new book coming out in about a year.
What's it called? What's it called, the new one?
Called Dare to Feel.
Dare to Feel. Nice. Okay. So I think we've got the main ones there. Closing message about sexuality, sensuality, spirituality. Anything you like.
I really have faith in us as humans, in our capacity to transform, to heal, to, let's say, be with these times that we're in. So I think right now it is a time where we all need to stay close to our passions and our aliveness and feel where we're starting to get dulled and numbed by all of the modern living. So I would say whatever it is that calls you into passion, into your aliveness, stay close to it during these times, because I don't know if there's a greater agenda to keep us kind of quiet, placated, or numb, or if it's just something that's happening coincidentally. But we need that prana, that chi, that jing, that life force that calls us forward into the moment, into more love, into art, into creation, into solution. And we all are needed at this time. So you came for a reason. Show up, baby.
Alexandra, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me on your podcast, Mark.
Mark Walsh here. If you like that, you probably like embodimentunlimited.com and our app. So on both of these things, you can get a bunch of podcasts that aren't available here, some exclusive ones with some big names, some people you'll probably recognize that are over there. There's a copy of my book, PDF of my first book on embodiment, which seems that people like. I sold quite a few copies on Amazon, but there's a free copy there. What else is there? Loads of videos of me coaching embodiment, resources on trauma, on meditation, on yoga. And you can also chat to people without going on Facebook or any of that nonsense. So if you want to chat embodiment with people, that's there. And it's on the embodimentunlimited.com, all free, and the app available at the App Store and all that good stuff. So if you like this, do check those out.